general semantics stuff, at least in the early or the mid 20th century, the original stuff that we were looking at by Irving Lee, by Hayakawa, by Weinberg. Was there someone else in there? Those are the three main ones I thought. Lee, Weinberg, Hayakawa. Yeah. And they're all kind of talking about the same kind of stuff, right? And the general theme there is we should always strive to be more factually oriented. Facts are things that we can ascertain objectively through observation and through verification, right? These are guys who are still kind of privileging and prioritizing the scientific approach to all things, including, you know, how it is that we speak, right? Let's be scientific about how we communicate. So that means that before we say anything, let's go figure out what the actual factual basis of our statement is. And otherwise, we should be mute, right? We should understand that when we make inferences, we are essentially making guesses, and that inferences are weak, whereas objective facts are strong. So everything always needs to be rooted in extensional world, right? The real world, in objective facts, in verification, in contextualizing, right? That's Hayakawa. In understanding the difference between a signal and a symbol, in understanding that much of our lives, especially today, are organized around images and around representations and around narratives and stories and whatever. They would still say all that stuff is fictional, essentially. It's all representations. It's all part of the verbal world, not the extensional world, right? And so we need to be very, very, very much on guard. That's what they would be saying, 70 years ago. What else here? The ladder of abstraction is important. Be careful of abstracting when we move up. When we go from Donovan Conley to, professor to however up we want to go. Canadian, world citizen, I don't know. Right? When we move away from specificity, when we move away from concreteness, we are always putting ourselves in jeopardy. So everything that slices through these readings is about getting it right? Factual accuracy. And they're kind of binaristic. And they do think that there's right and there's not right. There's incorrect. And our job is to be over here with the right and the correct. And we do that by, focusing on facts, being careful of inferences, being very careful of rhetoric, because rhetoric is all about appealing to our vulnerabilities, our weaknesses, our susceptibilities, right? And so a lot of these guys acknowledge that rhetoric is sometimes useful and necessary, but it's very be careful, because it can lead us astray. So that's all kind of the first 4 weeks. That's all serious man, right? And so first thing you need to do is make sure that you're good on the rhetoric man and the serious man from Stanley Fish. Even when we move away from that first month of readings and we move into the second module on beyond general semantics and we start complicating things, much of that stuff is still directly referring back to the assumptions and the setup and the framework of the first 4 weeks of class, right? So first thing we're looking at in that new module was by Marshall McLuhan. And here we're starting to look at the elements of the kind of the framework that the general semanticists were interested in, right? Don't forget we have the self, the individual. We have language, which sort of operates between selves and also between the self and the external, extensional, real objective world, right? And so we have the real objective world as well. What else do we have? Yeah, those are kind of it. And so we have these kind of components, and what the general semanticists are trying to do is shore everything up, make it nice and tidy and clean and consistent and redundant. That's the correspondence thing, right? So what's going on out there should be accurately represented and reflected in language, which is also therefore accurately represented in thought. Sorry, I'm very tired. Words are not coming together. In thought, out again through language, into the reception faculties, ears, eyes, and on and on and on. And so the Serious Man agenda is about making the correspondences all line up and chain up. And immediately what we see with Marshall McLuhan is just how much of a kind of pipe dream all that is, right? Because right off the bat, when we start thinking about a medium, right? Language is a medium, paper is a medium, screens are mediums, right? Something that is conveying, sort of shuttling something from here to here, but also, as we discussed with McLuhan, changing it along the way, right? So the medium affects the message. It shapes the message because of the very medium, because of how that technology is operating in our world and how we are working with it and how we are living with it. It alters how we receive the message, right? So right there with McLuhan, we're seeing that language or any medium is not such a cleanly neutral kind of what Rorty will call a, what does he say? It's just a neutral medium that kind of mediates truth back and forth between reality, objectively, and our subjective interpretations of that, right? McLuhan will say it's a lot more difficult, right? Because the very mediums by which we attempt to convey and communicate are also changing and shaping. It's weird. I was having a Facebook chat with an old student, actually, who took this class a couple years ago, Thomas. He just popped onto Facebook this morning. I haven't heard from him in like a year or two. Really sharp guy. Enjoyed his presence in class immensely. And he was like, "Hey, Dr. Conley, I watched this video this morning. I want to ask you about it." The weird part is the video came into my YouTube feed as well, and it was about how the ancient Greeks didn't see the color blue or something like this, right? And this long video about the relationship between language and environment and colors, and why is it that all the ancient cultures developed their words for colors by going to blue last, right? They start with white and black as words for the colors, and then they move to red, and then it's like yellow, green, and blues somehow always last, right? So he was asking about this, and we were having this sort of fun back and forth, right? And as I was kind of reminiscing with him, I was sort of suggesting that he go revisit Burke on terministic screens, right? Because the whole point of Burke's terministic screens is that the term, whether it's war or crime, as I discussed in that video, the terms both reflect a reality and shape that reality. So Burke was saying any selection is also a, what does he say? A deflection. Every selection is a deflection as well, right? So everything that we're focusing on means that we're not focusing on everything else. So there's a kind of looping thing that's going on here, where we're trying to come up with words to describe our environment, our reality, right? The words are made up. There's sounds, there's scribbles on paper, right? But we're doing our best to find something that can represent that, right? That refers to that thing. And once we do come up with that word and we come up with sort of agreement on that, now the word itself can actually shape how we see the world through that word. That's the terministic screen, right? So, Thomas and I were talking about the fact that, like, blue, even though we refer to the sky as blue, it's not really, right? And even though we refer to water, the ocean as blue, it's not really. So you can kind of understand how that blue would be the last thing to get named, because it's the last thing that would be kind of relevant environmentally in terms of like how we're living our lives. But white and black, that's like light and it's like day and night, right? These things sort of occur to you immediately. So it's all about usage being related to how we're living. So language is connected to our experience here and now, and that's why it's always evolving and changing. This is Rorty now. All right, so there's a looping thing, right? We create language to help us understand that reality, and then the language also affects how it is that we see and engage that reality. So it's both true and false to say that language sort of creates reality, because the first thing that's attempting to do is like point to it and say, this is that, right? Here's blue that refers to that berry on that tree over there. There's a blueberry, right? That color. Even though blueberries are more like purple, aren't they? So yeah, so I can understand how blue would come last because there's very little blue, actual blue, around us. And now think about, I was mentioning to him the old example of Eskimos, or, have so many different words for snow because their whole lives are kind of organized around wet snow, dry snow, light snow, heavy snow. And so you can imagine many different words for white as well, right? So it's really, again, all about kind of usage and practice and your direct kind of experience. And the language is meant to help organize that experience, right? So it makes good sense then that someone who comes into that culture who maybe is from the desert where they've literally never seen snow might not even have a word for white or snow, let alone the 15 different words for snow white, that might exist in a different culture, right? Makes perfect sense to me. In any case, the readings in that second chunk, I'll wrap up here, are about complicating those kind of clean, easy assumptions that we encountered in the first 4 weeks, right? So we had McLuhan, Burke, same thing, right? Language does not just mediate reality. So McLuhan, Burke, Rorty, all of that stuff, basically everything we read after the first 4 weeks is making the same point. Language is not a neutral mediator of objective reality. It doesn't reflect reality. It doesn't represent reality. It's something that we've invented to stand in for certain things. And it's not like we have words for everything. We have words for the things that we need words for. And sometimes those words aren't needed anymore. And we need to get rid of them. This is Rorty again. We need to redescribe. We need to kind of reinvent. We need to come up with new language for new situations, new occurrences, and so on. So that's basically it, right? So the latter half stuff, the more recent stuff, was all about how it is that language actually shapes thought or affects how it is that we see the world, and influences thought and therefore language and therefore meaning. And it's really hard to do the thing that the general semanticists of the middle part of the last century were saying, which is like just always be factual and always be, making sure that you're accurate. Now, don't forget that we also get that concept from Lippmann of the pseudo environment, which further complicates things, right? Because for Lippmann, our pseudo environment is essentially our verbal mediational environment. And don't forget, he was writing back in the 1920s, 30s. Jump forward 100 years, and like what around us is not pseudo. I mean, here I am in my office. There's a TV right there. There's a screen right there. Here's my phone. Papers everywhere. Laptop there. I'm recording right now, right? I'm recording based on my interpretation of these words on these pages, which are interpretations of interpretations, right? So this is super pseudo. Now, does that mean that we should just sort of abandon all hope of objectivity and just, run right in the direction of like subjective, will and like let's just make things up willy-nilly? No, at least not for me. There's still a real world out there that we need to engage with, and we still need language and references that help us do the job of working together, especially now that we have so many environmental challenges. So yes, we absolutely do need to like get it as right as we can in terms of, is it 1.5 degrees Celsius? Is it 2 degrees Celsius? 2.5? These are massively different kinds of realities, right? So yes, we need to still get it as right as we can, as close to accurate as we possibly can, knowing all the while that we'll never get it 100%, but we can get close. And then we need to do our best to be consistent and transparent about how we convey and communicate with one another. We need to still appreciate the power of context, the importance of context. We need to try to think about meaning in relation to context and go as far as we need to, right? So there's still like important insights with the general semanticists. I just kind of don't like the way they emphasize and the tone of some of that stuff in the 1950s. Like Lee in particular is kind of a jerk in that, like, what was the long one that we read? Was it facts first and then words, right? he gets a little snarky, frankly. He gets a little bit like, if you're not doing this, you're a crazy person, or you're a child, or you're willfully obtuse, or whatever. And it's like, dude, come on. We're all kind of caught up in this, right? So let's try our best to get it right, while also understanding how many influences and shaping mediums are always kind of coming at us, right? And so the good approach is the kind of rhetoric man approach that takes this class and appreciates just how much stuff is coming at us that is also altering our perception. We're always kind of caught up in these networks of influence, linguistic, narrativistic, reported, news, social media stuff. All this stuff's always kind of flying at us. And it makes the pseudo environment is our kind of real environment for the most part at this point, especially during a pandemic when we're all just sitting at home, like disengaged, right? But we still got to kind of maintain that sort of sense of like our language is meant to do things for us in relation to the real world. And there's my son. Hey, recording. So anyway, that's a good time to wrap up. It's a little longer than I was anticipating anyway, but hopefully there's some use in there in terms of like what the class has been engaged with and what to be expecting on the midterm. Don't forget, 25 multiple choice questions, 5 written response. I urge you at all costs to make sure that you leave yourself some time, enough time to write the written part. Right. So the problems that I've used the same test format now for several years. I like this format. It kind of does it all in the amount of time that we have. And it's all kind of organized around concepts. That's the way I like to sort of do things, even the study guide, core concepts. So move through the multiple choice questions as swiftly as you can. Get to the written ones. Do not leave written questions blank. Those are 10 points each. You can leave a multiple choice question and only lose 2 points, right? It's 5 times worse if you miss a written response. So do get those done as quickly as you can. Cycle back to the multiple choice if you have to, but don't short yourself on the writing. So I wish you well with the studying. Please do go back and get caught up on the videos, the readings, the prompts, whatever you need to. You have until Friday to do all that. That's all we're doing this week. I will be available. I have a pretty busy week. Pretty busy schedule. I got lots going on. But if you reach out, I'll do my best to respond and answer any questions you may have. But hopefully there's not too much. Hopefully you have what you need and it all makes pretty good sense. So wishing everyone the best. And I guess I'll be seeing you next week if I don't hear from you before then. So let's do this, gang. Good luck with it.